Hey, I'm Lauren,
And I'm Matt.
and this is Publish and Prosper.
Where publishing, technology, and marketing collide. Welcome to another episode of Publish and Prosper. We are back from weeks of traveling.
It's been 84 years.
Feels like that long since we've sat in these chairs, to be honest with you. I'm almost wondering if we should have had them cleaned while we were out.
They're probably dusty.
Yeah, I would imagine.
I was convinced I was going to come back to my desk just under like a complete layer of dust, perhaps some cobwebs.
You're ridiculous. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay.
You're ridiculous. I've had this weird tinge of guilt for the last 48 hours because I told you canceled a trip that me and my family were going to take for spring break for the kids because we just didn't want to deal with, there's a lot of stuff going on at the airports and things. If you're listening to this at the end of 2026, maybe this makes no sense, but right now in March of 2026, the airports are a mess.
Maybe at the end of 2026, airports are shut down entirely, so who can know?
I hope not. But anyways, so instead, we're going to take a trip that we can drive and not have to fly. And the destination of choice was Universal Studios.
Nice.
So it booked like a whole thing there, and I've just been feeling this heavy Disney guilt the whole time, which I'm sure is ridiculous. But, what's making it worse is in the studio right now, Lauren has this huge Disney 50th anniversary.
I knew you'd catch
like
that
shopping
and call
bag
it out.
that is literally like down in front of me. You can't see it if you're watching the video, but that's all I can see. And so it's
sorry.
like Walt Disney is just staring at me and like with that face of like, you filthy traitor.
I mean, you are a filthy traitor.
I agree.
Is that why you're wearing a Mickey Mouse sweatshirt today, so that you can display your loyalty?
Maybe subconsciously that's why I put it on. I don't know. I think my kids are just getting tired of me dragging them to Disney World whenever we actually do something.
Can't relate.
I mean,
That's a them problem.
yeah, anyways.
It's
Okay. Today, what we're actually going to talk about is what we feel authors and creators can learn from each other. And I just want to be clear when we say authors and creators, we are speaking specifically in terms of the differences between the two personas or types of creators. An author being somebody who traditionally identifies as an author, spends the majority of their time writing and creating books, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, whatever. And a creator being somebody who actually sort of is not confined to one particular medium or another. They are in the business of just creating content, not necessarily agnostic or, tied to one particular platform or medium, but is creating content solely for the benefit of monetization, potentially creating a brand or a business around it. So that's kind of how we're defining those two. And there are definitely some things that we think one could learn from the other and vice versa.
Yeah, because I think there's, this is absolutely not us saying that these are two completely disparate groups. In fact, we've made
Certainly
the argument
overlap.
repeatedly that they should overlap. Yes. But I think it's mostly like having just gone to these two events that we're going to talk a little bit about just back to back and realizing the difference between like one that was very, very author focused and one that was very specifically content entrepreneur and content creator focused.
Yeah.
Kind of realizing like the different approach that both of these audiences have to their content creation in general, and then also like how they approach their business or brand or whatever they're identifying it as.
Yeah. So this is on the heels of, we just returned from a couple of weeks of travel for two events, London Book Fair, which is a huge publishing industry focused event. I think the numbers that you pulled or the stats were, it had about just over 1,000 sponsors or vendors. Lulu was one of them, with booths there. And then it looks like they've published that they had about 33,000, give or take, attendees.
Yeah, that was reported by Publishers Weekly.
So it's a large show, but it is very much industry focused. It covers a broad range of industry niches. So everything from, foreign rights and rights acquisitions to sales and distribution for actually the larger publishing houses. It's where a lot of people go to try and, close the deal on partnerships with other brands or other publishers or other manufacturers or vendors or partners. And there's always a dedicated space for indie authors, and Lulu typically straddles that space between the indie author headquarters there and the technology and printing section in the two theaters or stages that kind of represent both of those. That's usually where we sit. So we're on the heels of that one, and then if you want to tell them a little bit about sponsor games.
Yeah, so we left London and came back to the U.S. and then immediately flew to Texas, which even just the distinction between London and San Antonio, Texas, just
immediately
polar
being,
opposites.
within 24 hours you were on another plane.
Yeah, well, it took Matt a little longer.
Actually flying. It took Lolly and I a little longer, yes.
Yeah, it was a rough travel experience for you, but I made it to San Antonio, and Sponsor Games was, I don't want to say the polar opposite, but Sponsor Games is a 3-day.
I think polar opposite is okay.
Yeah.
In a good way.
But not in a negative way. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yes.
Polar opposite, but not in a negative way.
Yeah.
Just this is like literally a 50-person, including sponsors and vendors and everything, and Justin's team. This event is put on by Justin Moore. And Creator Wizard, author of Sponsor Magnet.
That's right.
And this is a very, very concentrated, intensive workshop. It's super interactive workshop. It all takes place in one room. There's no breakout spots or anything like that. It's not London Book Fair is this big sprawling over the course of 4 show floors and smaller rooms and everything. Sponsor Games is super concentrated, tailored specifically to this group of content entrepreneurs to help them learn how to pitch themselves for sponsorship deals.
Yeah, to secure brand deals and sponsorship deals from other people. Yeah, so it is very much tailored and curated, like you said. So I do think it's the polar opposite of London Book Fair.
Yes.
But again, in a good way.
Yeah, but it was just, going to these events back to back, it was just very eye-opening of wow, seeing how differently people approach the idea of publishing a book, the idea of working with brands or vendors or partners in any way, the questions that we would get from authors at London Book Fair versus the questions that we would get from creators at Sponsor Games. It was really interesting to kind of see that juxtaposition. And there were more than one instance throughout that where I was like, man, I wish I could put this person in touch with this person and they could help each other out here.
It's also a very stark juxtaposition between how people treat their brands and their content.
Yes.
We often will go from a publishing event to a creator event fairly regularly.
Yes.
But because the turnaround was so tight this time, I think that's what made us go these are so vastly different. Normally we've got a few weeks in between each event. We've already settled down from the last one. You go into the new one, fresh eyes again. You've kind of already forgotten about the last event you were at and you're focusing on this one. We came into this one. They were so tightly, conjoined in terms of time, even though they spread across vast amounts of space, like going from London to San Antonio, Texas,
Which
multiple
was a very
time
cool
zones.
City. I did like San Antonio.
Anyways. So, yeah, it was just a lot more, I think, obvious to us this time, some of the things that we're going to talk about. And so, those are things like, what do we think authors could learn from creators and content entrepreneurs and vice versa? And what does that look like when somebody is kind of in, I guess, that Venn diagram middle section? Like, as a creator, as an author, what happens when, the two worlds align just perfectly? Like, what is the outcome there? What's the desired results? What does that look like, and what could you expect from that?
You're so determined to not use my Hannah Montana reference and say the best of both worlds. But don't worry, I'll do it. Happy 20th anniversary, Hannah
Guilty
Montana.
as charged.
But I do also, I kind of want to pull this in before we dive into the episode topic itself, because I actually came across this article from Publishers Weekly as I was looking for the info on how many people attended London Book Fair, and Publishers Weekly had done a little write-up on it. I'll link it in the show notes, but there were some interesting things in here that I wanted to point out if you're listening to this or a couple of our other recent episodes and still questioning the relevancy of this to you as an indie author or you as a content entrepreneur or whatever. First of all, I did want to, kind of remind everybody that I love an event like Sponsor Games, where it is a small 50-person event, 100-person event, whatever. I love that kind of like intimate, tailored, personalized setting for events. I mean, I also love London Book Fair or Comic-Con or BookCon or something like that. But
yeah, sorry, I was ordering lunch.
Oh my God, am I missing the lunch order?
We're sorting it out. Don't worry.
Okay, great.
I agree. For me, I will say I used to be terrified of these smaller events where in one room it's curated. There's typically less than 60, 70, 60 people, whatever, it doesn't matter. Because as an introvert, like that forces you to kind of be a much more active participant in the event. And I like to kind of hang back and just get the feel of it, and then, try to add value where I can without being like. But I will say that the way that Justin and his team curated and executed this event was a much different experience and much more enjoyable, and it really made you want to step in and be an active participant in that. So.
I just think there's something really nice about you kind of get to know everybody, like everyone gets to know you, and it's like you can actually take the time to answer somebody's question, like specifically if someone's coming up to you and is asking like, how would books work for me? Like you can actually be like, okay, like let's take a step back. Tell me about your content channel. Let's talk more about your goals for that, whatever. You can spend more time with people. Yeah,
that's the fun part of our job.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Which, no. I am glad you did, because, I've also sang the praises of how much I loved Momentum, Lou Mangello's event, which is very similar, 50-person, single room, multi-day event. But there is still a lot of value in these massive industry 100%. Events.
It's just a different kind of value.
Yes. And one of the things that Publishers Weekly pointed out in here is London Book Fair primarily serves as a venue for the rights trade for English language books and is a bellwether of what the world wants to read. So I think that's really, really important for people that are invested in publishing in any way, whether it's traditional or indie. If you are an author who is actively putting out books or a creator who is trying to find the right type of book to put out in the world, you have to be paying attention to these events. I'm not saying you have to attend them, but you have to be paying attention to the news and insights and announcements that come out of events like this, because it's really letting you know what's trending in the industry right now, which brings me to my second quote from here, which is very relevant to the episode that we just put out. I think it was 2 weeks ago at this point, about indie publishers or indie authors securing more traditional publishing deals.
Yeah.
This is a direct quote from Jake Bauman, who is the SVP for literary development at Sony Pictures Entertainment. Because remember in that episode, we talked about how it's all media corporations that own the publishing companies. So they have a vested interest in this. He said, the conversation feels more fragmented. Fan-driven IP and books coming out of the self-publishing pipeline remain a major focal point, while upmarket commercial book club fiction continues to be the dominant lane agents are pitching. That's really important. It's really important to know that this is what one of the VPs at Sony Picture Entertainment is saying. Yeah, the self-publishing pipeline is important.
Well, it's also a stark contrast between the two. So when you look at the media world, they're looking at the self-publishing pipeline, indie published content, which includes creators and people who operate in the creator economy. On the flip side of that, you have the literary agents who work on behalf, of the big five publishing houses. And from a literary standpoint, books being published, they're looking elsewhere. They're looking at that whole sort of book club segment. And those are typically your best sellers and a lot of the more top name authors. So that's a pretty stark juxtaposition between the two industries and what types of content they're looking for and where acquisitions are being made.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is then also why this conversation is so important and why it is so important for us to say, like, hey, if you are an author listening to this and you are in any way struggling with, like, you know, I heard your episode, or I'm listening to you guys talk about things like traditional publishing deals or leveling up my books or reaching new audiences or whatever, but I'm having a hard time doing that, because you can learn from creators and how they're approaching things.
Yeah.
And how that translates to you. So for the subject of what authors can learn from creators, number one, most important thing is how to treat your content as a business.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think where content creators, content entrepreneurs, and just, you know, people who identify as creators in general, where they get it right is that is sort of the core function of what they perform on a daily basis. It's not creating the content. That's actually a smaller portion of what they do. It's the promotion of that content. It's the monetization of that content. And it's the treating that content like a business so that they can rinse and repeat and grow whatever it is they're trying to build, whether it's a brand or something like that. And whether it's for the purposes of, you know, something long-term that they hold on to or something they want to build and exit from, they're treating it like a business. You're right. Absolutely.
I think that there's, I mean, the question that I got asked the most, I should have kept the tally, honestly, but the number one question that I got asked at London Book Fair by authors coming up to our booth was...
Where's the bathroom?
No, that was an easy one because it was right down the aisle from us. No, it was, does Lulu offer marketing services? And everybody wanted, that was the hot topic. And it has been for years. The report that we did last year, the Books and Business Insights report that we did last year, the top challenge that the respondents reported facing, regardless of what their income level was or time invested, how they're approaching whatever, the top challenge was marketing. And I'm pretty sure our 2023 report that we did with the Tilt also had very similar results.
It's always going to be that.
It's always going to be that. It is absolutely.
Here's a secret, and don't come at me in the comments, or you can. I don't care. If you're a publishing related business, you don't do marketing well, right?
Yes.
I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Penguin Random House or Tor or some other cool sub imprint of a bigger imprint or a hybrid publisher. If you're making claims about being an expert marketing team, or it's just not true. It's not right. You're either super good at publishing or you're super good at marketing. You're not super good at both. It'd be very rare to find one. So that is almost always a problem.
Yeah, and that was a point that I had this conversation several times with people where, you know, we were kind of going back and forth, and they would be like, well, first of all, I don't understand. Like, why can't I find any self-publishing company that offers marketing services as part of their like suite of solutions? And I was like, you're never going to. Well,
you'll find them, but they suck.
But they won't be valuable, or you're going to have to pay. Right. Like, you're definitely never going to find them that it's a free part of their services. But then we'd go back and forth on this for a little bit. And then the person would be like, well, so you're saying that I have to go traditional publishing if I want to do the marketing for me? And I would say no, because they're not going to do it for you either. They will do some. They will provide more marketing support than a self-publishing or indie publishing service will.
Yes.
But you are still, as the author, most authors that are traditionally published in any capacity are doing some marketing on their own too.
Well, they're hiring freelance marketers or publicists or people to help them, which I think is the right way to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's not, there's nothing anywhere that is doing 100% of the marketing for your book as an author.
And if they are or claim that they are, they're not doing it well.
No, I wouldn't trust them.
Yeah.
And I definitely
I mean,
wouldn't
we're
pay them.
marketers that work for a publishing
Yes.
company, but I mean, we still don't offer marketing services. Like, the core of what we do is publishing technology. It's about getting books into the hands of readers, period. You know, primarily through direct sales channels and things like that. But, you know, marketing is better left to marketers, not publishing companies or publishers who claim to have a marketing department that will do, just go find a good marketer. And by the way, if you go outside of the publishing ecosystem to find marketing help, whether that's, you know, a freelancer or an agency or otherwise, you're probably going to get some cooler out of the box types of marketing tactics being deployed on your titles, which are ultimately probably going to lead to better book sales and more discoverability. So I would always go outside of the publishing ecosystem if you can. But again, back to the topic here, that is the number one thing that creators and content entrepreneurs get right, is they treat their content as a product. It's the business. It's so, you know, the business of getting that product monetized to create long-term growth. So I just think that there's a lot that authors can learn there, and sort of bridging that gap is not easy. But the more that you immerse yourself as an author in that sort of creator and creator marketing world and better understand what they do, I think the better off you'll be able to support your own efforts.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And that's, you know, I guess one thing I really kind of left out of this topic is how people can go about doing these things. So if you are listening to this and this is resonating and you're like, wow, yeah, I would like to add some fresh marketing perspective, go find a content marketing event. Go find, whether it's an in-person event or like an online, like a virtual workshop or a webinar or something. Find something related to like an introduction to content marketing and start there.
Yeah, and to be clear, you know, try to find something that is very much focused on content marketing.
Yes.
And not just, you know, don't go and immediately sign up to the largest general marketing event you can find. Those are oftentimes worthless as well. They're big pitch fests for big brands, but go find a smaller content marketing event. Maybe start with one that's virtual and online. I mean, we love in-person events. I think there's no denying the value of those, but if this is your first time, you know, potentially attending or participating in a content marketing event, maybe find a virtual one. There's plenty of them out there that are pretty good. So that would give you a better idea, and then maybe branch out and find yourself an in-person one. There's a lot of those out there as well. You know, we've talked about Momentum, which is Lou Mangello's. That's a great one. There are several others, and I know of a few more that'll be popping up next year that are in the works. So, you know, just look for those.
I think there's definitely a rise of like smaller focused events.
Yeah.
Like I think that's something that we're really seeing more and more of, whether they're in person or online. And I absolutely, you know, and we've done whole episodes on how much we like in-person events, and I'm never going to knock an in-person event. But if you're just like, you know, feeling out this space and seeing like, okay, is this the right direction? Like, can I actually get value from some kind of like content marketing education here? Start small with something that's not a physical commitment that you have to travel to.
Yeah. The next thing I think that authors could really learn from creators, or that creators do really well, that authors sometimes or oftentimes don't, or just don't really know to focus on, is building your brand. And so a lot of authors tend to focus and go from title to title.
Yes.
And what they don't put enough emphasis on or spend enough time doing is building their brand as an author or creator, as somebody who creates content. And I think that's where creators often get it right in building their brand, whether that's them as an individual and that's your brand, or you actually create a brand. But either way, building that and that brand association so that people come to recognize that whatever comes from this brand, whether that's a person or entity, they can trust that it's quality, that it's something they're going to enjoy, that it's worth spending their money on. So creators do that really well.
We talk about the idea a lot of like the instant buy, like things that we're fans of that we don't need to know, whether it's an author or a music artist or whatever it is. I don't care. I feel like that's always the goal for any kind of creator. And I think that's something that content entrepreneurs and content creators are really good at. Like, I'm going to follow you. There are people that I think I told you about this. Jeff C. and Katie Fox just launched a new live video podcast that they're doing every Friday. Like, it's the Maker's Table, I think. And it's literally just the two of them. Jeff whittles and Katie's crocheting, and they talk while they're doing it. I'm there. I love it. Because I like these two people a lot, and I like their content, and I find value in their content, and I'm down for following them on like whatever new journey they're going on, because I'm curious to see where it goes and how that unfolds. And when you have like a loyal audience, when you are a creator that has built this loyal audience, you can get them to follow you on that journey.
Sure.
And I think that authors can definitely benefit from that too, because that's the goal, right? You want to have the kind of base of readers that whatever new book you're going to put out, they're going to come and buy it from you.
Yeah. Yeah, we have an author, Katie Cross, that works with us, that she's done a really good job of building her brand. And so, when she travels, sometimes, an example, she had to come to the area where we're located, our headquarters in the Durham area, for a wedding. But, she can, and many times, just put out there like, hey, I'm going to be in this city. Are there any fans, people that want to meet up and, get together and, talk books or whatever? And oftentimes, most times, she has a lot of takers. And again, it's when you build that direct connection with your fans, with your audience, with your customer base, and you really do a good job of building your brand so that people come to recognize it. You can do things like that, and you can monetize in a number of different ways. And you're going to see probably the long-term benefits of what you're doing. You're going to realize those a lot faster than somebody who's not. So
this isn't in any way, shape, or form an opportunity for us to just knock on authors for an hour, because they're, what you may have noticed from the intro or the title is that we are very much saying that these are things, or there are things that these two audiences can learn from each other. So there's definitely plenty that creators can and should learn from authors as well.
Well, and both of us have a very high regard and respect for authors in general and their craft and what they do as avid readers and book nerds. Like, absolutely, we're not knocking authors at all. And in fact, we do a lot of this because we want to elevate most of the authors that are out there that are struggling with some of these things. So, as you just said, though, there's a flip side of this coin, and we think there are things that, again, on the heels of these two events, there are things that we think creators could learn from authors, that authors do really well.
Yeah.
One of them is what I just mentioned, and that is the actual craft of writing. Like, there's a very clear difference between somebody who knows how to write really well, enjoys it, knows the craft, understands how to put together a good story or narrative. And when you can do that, the actual content doesn't even matter.
Yep.
Like, if you can craft content properly, if you can write a good story or a good narrative, if you know the elements, what the actual content, you could be selling me, a 1955 Ford that has no wheels on it, half the engine is missing, no exhaust, and the paint's peeling off. But if you wrote a really good story and narrative around it, I'll probably buy it. I'll at least come look at it. Like, so, understanding craft, like the whole concept of properly outlining and writing content and then editing it, and the difference between, writing an actual book versus short and long form content for digital and social media outlets and things like that. Like, understanding the craft, I think, is a big important part.
Absolutely it is, because I do think that that's, probably the number one pushback that we get from creators when we're talking about the idea of using a book for their content or their brand is the people that are saying, well, I mean, yeah, I understand the value and I think that's a good idea, but I'm not much of a writer. all right, homie, a bunch of people that are writers aren't much of a writer either.
That's
they
true.
had to learn. They had to develop their craft. They had to do, I went to grad school for creative writing. Like that is something that you have to actually like learn how to do and how to work at. And if you are somebody who understands the value of this, but you recognize like, yeah, you know, all of my content creation so far has been short form video content. And yes, I write scripts for these short form videos, but writing a script for a 3 to 5 minute video is nowhere close to writing a full length book. Like, yes.
Agreed.
You're not wrong about that. And even if you are going the route of taking your existing content and organizing it into a book, that's still like you still need to understand the craft of how to do that. Yeah. And the way to learn how to do that is to go learn from authors because they have perfected that already.
That's what they do all day, every day.
That is, in fact, exactly what they do. So I think that's hugely valuable and kind of on the heels of that and to go along with that then is the storytelling that goes with it. And whether that's storytelling within the content of your book or storytelling as part of your overall brand narrative.
Yeah. And specifically for creators, you know, understanding how storytelling is actually a marketing tactic. It should be the core of your marketing. And on a side note, I was just looking at, so another event we'll be attending soon is put on by the IBPA. It's called Publishing University. They announced their keynote speaker maybe a week ago. It's Donald Miller. Donald Miller writes the story brand sort of series of books. They're basically marketing books though, and it's all about, you know, using story and storytelling and narrative to market and sell. It's a perfect overlap. You've got a publishing conference here once again, who the keynote speaker is an author that actually writes about using storytelling and narrative to market and sell things. So, you know, there's clear overlap here, but again, creators understanding craft and then now also understanding how to use storytelling as your marketing, you know, the core of your marketing. Like I said, if you can craft a really good story, if you can write a really good story or a really good narrative around whatever it is, like you've won already. Like you're going to suck in some readers, you're going to pull in some interested parties, and, you know, without it, you're not. But I think some of the best nonfiction content that I've read, fiction obvious, but nonfiction content I've read always starts with some sort of, you know, either personal anecdote or just a really good element of a story that kind of, it draws you in, even though it's nonfiction. Like you just get this really comfortable sort of feeling when you start reading this content. So I couldn't agree more. I think that if more creators were able to craft really good story and narrative around their content or the concept of something, a product or brand or whatever it is they're doing, they would find success faster as well.
Yeah, I will drop a link in the show notes if you want to learn more about that event.
I think something else that authors tend to do really well when they are able to sort of execute on it is connecting with their audience. And so a lot of them actually achieve this without trying too hard. Oftentimes what happens is a community will spin up around an author, sometimes unbeknownst to the author initially, but nonetheless, once it is known, authors are typically really good at connecting with their fans and their readers and things like that. This doesn't mean that creators aren't good at building an audience, but there's a difference between building an audience, right, that will potentially purchase content from you or participate, and being connected with that audience and participating with that audience and really being a part of that community versus just facilitating something. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think that's because obviously, I mean, we just talked about this in saying what authors can learn from creators. Creators are very often good at building that audience and building a fan base of people that are fans of their brand and not of a specific piece of content of theirs. And that's what authors need to be doing more of. But I do think that for a lot of creators, they find themselves kind of stagnating at a certain point within that, where they're like, okay, I've got my audience. Like, I've got these people that follow me on social media, but I'm having a hard time mobilizing them, or I'm having a hard time getting them to convert from Instagram followers to email subscribers, or getting them to buy my content or join my paid community over here, or whatever. And I think that for a lot of creators that find themselves stuck at that level, go check out what authors are doing. Go find out, like, authors are getting people to, like, their street teams to promote their book for them for free. How are they doing that? Go figure that out. Go learn from them. Go see what they're doing. Worst case scenario, you get some new ideas for how to try building up those audience connections. They can't hurt.
Yeah.
But I think it's always, I mean, the same thing that we said kind of throughout this episode, it's never a bad idea to just step outside of your area of expertise and see what other people are doing in, like, the next industry over.
Yeah.
Or a tangentially related industry, and just see, like, so fresh perspective, fresh eyes. What are people doing here? How can I relate that back to what I am trying to do?
Yeah.
And I think that the people that we see having the most success in both of these fields are the people that are doing that and taking the best of both worlds.
Yeah. I think when we talk about where all this meets in the middle, again, that part of the Venn diagram where there's overlap, and that's usually where your success happens, your sweet spot. That's where, you know, all these things are working together harmoniously to help you sort of grow. When we talk about people who have done a really good job of that, you know, on the author side, we mentioned Katie Cross. Katie's done a fantastic job of all of these things. You know, on the author side, obviously no shortage of being able to generate really good stories, really good series in a couple of different genres. She's a prolific and avid writer, and has built a really good, solid fan base. But also part of her success was that she's utilized a lot of these things that we talk about that are typically found more on the creator side, or people who are really doing more of the marketing and sales stuff related to growing a business. And she has put a lot of that in place over the years. She spent a lot of time, a lot of trial and error, and she has devoted a lot of her time to trying to teach other authors how to do it, oftentimes for free. You know, she speaks at a lot of author conferences, or has in the past, on how to do some of these things. She's very open with, you know, her experiments, where they've failed, where they've been successful. So, you know, if you're looking for a great example on the author side of somebody who has, you know, squarely landed in the middle of that Venn diagram and is clearly, you know, got a good grasp on how to combine all of these different tactics and the best of both of these worlds, somebody who could move freely if she wanted to from London Book Fair to, you know, sponsor games, or, you know, CEX or another creator event, over to Dragon Con and then back. Like, she would have no problem moving in any of those circles.
Oh yeah,
because she's commanded a really good grasp of all of those tactics and all of the ways that she would put those things together to build this brand that she has around her name as an author or creator at this point.
I mean, yeah, not only could she easily find relevancy in attending those and connecting with the other attendees there, but she could probably give a speaking session at every single one of those events.
Yeah, that's my point.
That would be relevant to the people.
Anybody can go and show up and attend these events, yeah, but she could absolutely get on a stage at any one of these events and talk about what she's done, and it be relevant to everybody in that audience for any of those events, period.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she's done sponsorships for her stuff. She has secured brand deals. She has secured, you know, other types of publishing deals. On the flip side of that, she's pretty much indie published everything that she's done successfully. She's got a great direct sales channel where she establishes
fantastic
connections.
example of using direct sales to build your audience, to, like, tailor and customize that to customize that customer journey and that experience where it's very clear. I'll link her website in the show notes. Definitely go check that out if you're curious about any of this, because it's really like, it's very well branded. It's very well designed. She has a clear, like, if you're here about this book series, go here. If you're interested in this book series, go here. She's very, very like specific and intentional with everything that she does. And it's because she treats her writing business as a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that end, by the way, you know, we talk a lot about, you know, all these things that you should do, you know, having a website or a storefront and all these other things. You know, she, again, in terms of treating it like a business, she recognizes the value. And when you can afford to pay an expert to do it for you, just like we said earlier, if you're in that author world and you're not great at marketing and sales, and you've already tried, you know, working with a publisher to get your stuff marketed and they failed, which they normally will, go find a freelance marketing, you know, a consultant or an agency or somebody. She has paid somebody at this point to build up her website and her Shopify storefronts so that it does have that very professional feeling, so that it does, you know, the user experience is very much cohesive across all of the different, you know, genres and books that she writes. And so treat it like a business. Invest the money and the time when and where you can as you continue to grow along the way.
I do also want to point out within that if you're reluctant to pay for marketing services because you're like, well, that's just like a never ending money pit. I'm just going to be throwing money into that forever. Absolutely not. If you're doing it correctly, if you're hiring the right kind of agency or freelancer, if they're doing it correctly, yes, because it should run itself after a while. If your marketing is done well, it should continue to build on itself without you having to pay somebody to do it if they set it up correctly.
Well, but there's also always a quantifiable return on your spend.
True.
You know, almost every bit of especially performance or digital marketing, but in general, almost every form of marketing. Now, events gets a little murky. It's sometimes hard to track. But, you know, if you're paying a marketer to do stuff for you, typically they're doing digital stuff. It's, you know, paid ads and social media stuff. That is all quantifiable, trackable, there's a return on your spend. If that return on your spend is 200% or higher, it doesn't matter what you pay them because you're making double back. So who cares what it costs? It's working. So yeah, keep doing it. The flip side of that is, like you said, like if it's not working, you're going to know. So stop spending that money. Tell them to figure it out, or go find a different marketer to work with, or a different agency to work with, or something like that. But marketing doesn't have to be this scary unknown void of like, oh, I'm just throwing dollars into this well and I'm not seeing any. It should not be.
Right.
Most of the marketing that you would be doing, you should very much be able to see in black and white the return on what you're spending.
Yes. And it's also, it should build on itself in the sense of like,
of course,
if you are, you know, if you're building the audience base now, if you are investing in paid marketing to build this audience base now, and then you're continuing to funnel content to that audience to develop those relationships with that audience, then by this time next year, maybe you don't have to pay to market your next book to that audience because they are loyal enough at that point that they're going to buy it from you without the paid marketing.
That's right.
So you're paying to establish your marketing setup and then building on it from there, maybe with tapered investment.
Yep.
For sure. Yeah. And also, before we move on to the next example, I do want to point out that Katie is a fiction author. So if you're listening to this and you're like, well, it's always the nonfiction, it's always the business people or the entrepreneurs or whoever. No, Katie is doing all this as a fiction author.
On the nonfiction side, or on the creator side, I should say, not nonfiction necessarily, but on the creator side, we worked with someone recently, or, you know, fairly recently. His name is Austin Church, and he basically, his whole sort of business, what he does is he educates other freelancers on how to charge more money, how to make more money as a freelancer, whether you're a freelance graphic artist or a freelance writer or a freelance, you know, some sort of consultant or designer. Austin has become, you know, one of the leading sort of, I think, experts in how to operate as a freelancer get paid what you need to get paid to lead the life that you want to lead. But what Austin does really well, not just on that creator side with the business stuff, but in keeping with the spirit of what we're talking about, Austin's style of writing, you would think that he has a fiction background. Like, he understands the craft in and out. Like, he's just an extremely talented writer. And the way that he writes, almost every long form piece of content he puts onto LinkedIn, even short form for that matter, and his book that was, an amazing book. There's so much story and narrative built in. Like, it's just easy to read anything that Austin writes. His LinkedIn posts are great. His newsletters are great. They always start with some sort of, again, a personal anecdote or a story or something funny or self-deprecating, with him or his kids or his family or just anything in general. But they're always entertaining. And he's almost always, if not always, able to tie it back in to some sort of marketing or sales concept that helps people further themselves in their business and their brand. So he just does a really good job of bringing in, like we talked about, those elements, that are most closely associated with the craft of fiction writing, and this idea of weaving storytelling into actual marketing and sales copy.
I think there's a really underappreciated value in that. I am subscribed to Austin's newsletter. I am not a freelancer. I don't think 95% of his content is relevant to me in terms of like professionally what I have any interest in doing. But I open and read that newsletter every Friday.
Yeah, I never thought about that.
I know that it comes out on Fridays. I read his newsletter every Friday morning when it shows up in my inbox.
That's actually a testament to what I just said, because
yes.
I've never thought about that either. I'm probably the farthest thing from a freelancer, but I read every single one of his newsletters.
Yeah, because he's such a good writer that I read them. They're
some
fun.
of this stuff actually I don't think is just for freelance people. There are things that he has written about where beyond the entertainment value of reading something that he's written, it just makes you feel good. It makes you want to keep reading. There are concepts that I've pulled out of there that doesn't matter if you're a freelancer or you're C-suite as a marketer at a publishing company. Like, yes. They're relatable. There's value there. So again, I think that is a testament to the craft and the ability to use story really well.
I think there's also the value in having people that are invested in your brand or content, especially if they're not related to it. Like, because I can understand people maybe hearing that and going, okay, well, like, why do I care if people are engaging with my content, but like they're not going to buy my course or my products or whatever. Mm-hmm. There are plenty of people that I'm a fan of their work without it being relevant to me, that I'm basically just sitting here waiting for them to put out something that is relevant to me. And the second they do, I'm going to buy it, or I'm going to subscribe to it, I'm going to participate in it because I want to support them.
I'll actually do one better.
Okay.
The reason why you should care potentially is because while yes, I do find value at times in what he's written as a non-freelance operator, also understanding that a lot of the content is geared towards freelancers. What I will say is, it would be easy to say, well, this isn't relevant to me. I'm not going to keep reading his newsletters, but they are so entertaining. They do draw you in. And anytime I'm in a room and there's freelancers in the room,
yes.
Who am I recommending to them? There's only one person, yep. Austin Church. So, yeah, you might go, well, again, what do I care if people are reading my newsletters or my content regularly, but they might not be able to partake in the services I'm offering. You should care because they have a mouth. Word of mouth is applicable in almost every and any scenario, whether they've paid for your services or not. If they find value in who you are as a creator, as an author, and what you do, chances are they know somebody that could benefit from your content. And you will be the first one or the first name that comes out of their mouth if you're able to establish that kind of a connection with them.
I was just telling somebody this at Sponsor Games when we were there, that last year at CEX, Justin was walking around handing out copies of his book to people and loudly handing out. Like he was like, we were in a big like open atrium and you could hear him throughout the whole room giving out copies of his book to people for free. And 3 months later, when I was at Momentum, somebody asked a question in the room about sponsorships. And before I could even open my mouth, 3 other people in the room that had all been at CEX said, you got to check out this guy, Justin, and his book Sponsor Magnet. And that is where it becomes relevant, because even if none of them, I don't know if any of them were interested in sponsorships or read his book or were looking at it or whatever, but immediately passed on that recommendation. And I watched that happen in real time. And I was like, wow, that's fun. Great.
Yeah.
So absolutely relevant, absolutely cool to see it happen. We'd love to see it happen. We'd love to see it happen more, you know?
Well, I mean, I think we will.
I think so
There's
too.
a lot more author and creator events on our schedule for this year, so.
Can't wait.
And I don't see that changing anytime soon.
So you're not totally burnt out on travel?
Oh, I'm burnt out on travel, 100%.
And when are you going to Universal?
In 3 days. Yeah, I'm burnt out on travel. Doesn't mean I get to stop traveling. It doesn't mean we get to stop doing events. I mean, that's a big part of what we do, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
I mean, you already know this, but I literally, on the flight home from San Antonio, booked a flight to Orlando because I said if I'm going to keep traveling, I might as well get some Disney time in there. So same. But the travel, I mean, it's still fun. What was your favorite thing we did in London?
That's a hard one because this year I didn't really do anything outside of the trade show, the book fair. Normally we're there a little longer or we plan more activities outside of it. But I think this year specifically, my favorite thing about London would probably have to be, and this is kind of a cringe response, but we drastically changed our booth approach and our messaging and our positioning in the market. And so this was the first time we were able to roll that out and see how it resonated with people. And as a marketing nerd, which I don't talk about very often, that was actually really cool to see and see how that played out in real time. So I guess this year that would have been my favorite thing, was just really seeing how people reacted to our presence this year versus previous years.
That's fair.
So
that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure London will still be there next year.
Well, I hope so.
What about Texas?
Oh, I have to say my favorite part about sponsor games this year, because we were there last year. Well,
you were there last year.
That's right. The royal we as Lulu.
Right.
This year there was a couple of things. One, I absolutely requested that if we were coming in as a sponsor again this time, that I wanted the Lulu logo branded on the foam of every latte that came off that barista cart in the back of the room, and Justin absolutely made that happen. So that was really cool to see.
It was really cool.
And not obviously, some of the best coffee lattes I'd had in a long time. So shout out to Justin and whoever the coffee people were that he hired. But
shout out to Sarah for putting that together too.
There you go. Yep, Sarah Loretta as well. The other really cool thing this year was Justin and Sarah had arranged for all of us to have dinner one night on a boat that goes down the little canals there and on the Riverwalk in San Antonio. So we had 3 or 4 boats, and we all ate dinner, having boat rides and a kind of a tour of that Riverwalk downtown San Antonio area. And that was really super cool. I wasn't sure if I would like that or not.
Yeah.
But it ended up being a highlight of that event.
I agree. That was absolutely my favorite.
It was also a great way to come outside of my comfort zone there and talk to other people on our boat. So yeah, it was really cool. I
was very impressed that you stayed.
I wasn't sure if I was going to.
I know. I know, but no, I agree. That was absolutely my favorite part because it was a cool way to get to see San Antonio. It was a cool experience. I was sat at a table with a lovely group of people that I got to have some really nice conversations with, and our tour guide was really funny.
Yeah.
So it gave us a nice little like Jungle Cruise light experience.
I was going to say he was probably one level away from being a good Jungle Cruise operator.
That's okay.
If he wanted to be, I think he could do it.
We'll help him out with
Run that Jungle Cruise.
Absolutely. All right.
Anything else you want to talk about? I want to go eat lunch.
I do too. Do you think it's here yet?
I don't know.
Let's go find out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for traveling with us, whether it was physically or metaphorically. If there's anyone listening that we met over the course of our 2 weeks of travel here, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us. And if you have never traveled anywhere with us or met us anywhere, maybe you should. Maybe you should check out some in-person events.
Well, go check out our new events page that we launched
I'll
on
link
our
that
website.
in the show notes.
Yeah.
And you can see where we'll be at later this year and see if maybe any of them are the thing that you need to help you out with your author or content creator journey.
Yep. All right. Like and subscribe. Do all the things. Give us a review, please.
Please.
Yeah, we're still sitting at the same amount we've had for like a year.
I know.
I don't know if that's good or bad.
I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't know.
I do know that Apple is rolling out video on Apple Podcasts. And so we are going to be introducing that soon on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Cool.
So if anyone has any thoughts on that, let us know in reviews.
All right.
And until then, we'll be back next week with another new episode.
Later.
Publish and Prosper is brought to you by Lulu.com. To learn more, visit publishprosperpodcast.com. For more episodes like this one, be sure to like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in.